When she finally breaks the silence, your biggest risk isn't saying the wrong thing, it's reacting too fast. That one moment of emotional impulse is where most men lose their leverage, their clarity, and their standards. She'll sense instantly whether you've grown or whether you're still desperate for her attention. But here's the hidden part. This moment can actually work in your favor if you know how to use it. There's a specific way to respond that shows her you've evolved, that your life didn't freeze during her absence, and that you now move from grounded strength, not emotional hunger. The shift is subtle, but it changes everything because understand this, her message isn't a romantic surprise, it's a negotiation. How you respond in the first few seconds silently defines your role going forward. Men who answer from instinct fall right back into the old dynamic. Men who answer from clarity reset the entire frame without saying a single clever line. This video is going to show you exactly how to move with the kind of presence that makes her feel the difference. Like and subscribe before we get into it, because the first principle we're about to break down becomes the backbone of every interaction that follows. The moment her name lights up your phone after weeks of silence, something fires in your chest before your brain even gets a chance to catch up. Your hand twitches toward the screen. Your mind flashes old memories. Your body reacts like it's been waiting in the shadows for this exact moment. And without even realizing it, you've shifted from living your life to responding to hers. That instant surge you feel, it's not confidence, it's not clarity, it's not even excitement. It's a rush of emotional electricity built from uncertainty, longing, and unfinished business. Your nervous system treats her message like a rescue rope, something to hold on to, something that promises relief. That's why your first instinct is always the same. Grab the phone, type something fast, reassure her you're still there. But that instinct isn't strength. It's fear dressed up as enthusiasm. It's fear that she might disappear again if you don't respond quickly enough, fear that you might lose the connection you've been replaying in your head, fear that you only get one shot and you'd better not mess it up. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When you respond instantly, you reveal far more than you think. You show her you're standing in the exact same spot she left you. You show her her silence didn't impact your standards, your growth, or your momentum. You show her she still has emotional pull over you, even after she walked away. Women don't need a psychology textbook to sense this. They feel it instantly, whether consciously or not. They can read the energy behind a message the same way they read tone, posture, or attention, and nothing exposes a man's emotional dependence faster than a lightning-quick reply after being kept on pause. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's about understanding the difference between acting and reacting. When you fire back a message, the second she reappears, you're not choosing anything, you're not evaluating anything, you're not leading anything, you're simply surrendering to the easiest, fastest hit of emotional comfort. Every time you do that, you lose leverage, clarity, and presence. A man who reacts instantly is not a man in control. He's a man begging for the next moment of relief. And this is exactly where the shift begins. If you want to stop being pulled by impulse and start responding like someone who respects himself, the first thing you must learn is the power of the pause. That split second when you stop yourself from answering right away. That's where your power begins. Most men think pausing is some kind of trick, a strategy to appear distant or raise their value, but the pause has nothing to do with manipulation. It has everything to do with reclaiming your emotional center. When she reaches out after silence, your nervous system leaps forward while your mind is still tying its shoelaces. You feel the urge to respond immediately because instant gratification feels like certainty. It removes the discomfort, it soothes the unknown, but a man who can't tolerate a moment of discomfort becomes predictable, impulsive, and easy to influence. The pause interrupts that cycle. It gives your emotions time to land, settle, and stop running the show. You're not ignoring her, you're grounding yourself. Here's the distinction most men never learn. Ignoring her to provoke a reaction is a game. Pausing to check in with yourself is discipline. Containment means you can feel all the waves, relief, tension, curiosity, pride, but you don't let any of them steer your next move. You hold them, you breathe through them, you let them stabilize so you can respond from a place that isn't fear or craving. A woman can feel the difference between a man who waits because he's strategic and a man who waits because he's stable. A stable man doesn't rush. A stable man doesn't flinch. A stable man doesn't leap at the first hint of attention. And that stability is rare. Rare enough that it commands respect without forcing anything. Picture this. She sends a simple, "Hey," your pulse jumps, your instinct screams, "Reply now." But instead, you put the phone down. You continue what you are doing, your work, your workout, your life. You give yourself 30 to 60 minutes for your mind to return to baseline. When you come back to that message, you're thinking clearly instead of reacting blindly. You're choosing rather than chasing. This isn't about withholding affection. It's about refusing to let a notification dictate your behavior. Only a man who lacks self-control needs to play games. A man with self-control doesn't need tricks. He just needs to pause long enough to return to himself. And in that pause is the doorway to the next crucial step, understanding what's happening inside you before you even think about answering her. Before you even think about tapping that keyboard, there's one place you have to look first. Not at her message, not at her timing, not at her emojis, at yourself, because the truth is brutally simple. If your emotional state is shaky, your interpretation of her message will be shaky too. A man who needs her message to feel okay is already negotiating from the ground. And that's why this step matters more than any clever reply you could ever type. If you don't check your internal state, you won't be responding to her. You'll be responding to your own fear, loneliness, or fantasies. So ask yourself the first question. Am I hoping this message saves me from feeling alone? If the answer is yes, pause even longer because that's not clarity. That's desperation wearing cologne. Second question, am I assuming this message means everything has changed? One, hey, doesn't erase past distance, past patterns, or past inconsistency. Your mind will try to fill in the blanks with what you want to be true. That's projection. That's your imagination writing a love story she hasn't signed off on. Third question, if a random acquaintance sent this same message, would I feel this much excitement? If the honest answer is no, then what you're reacting to isn't the message. It's the history, the chemistry, the unresolved craving. That's not a place to respond from. Now, step back and look at the bigger picture, the pattern. Has she disappeared before? Does she tend to return only when she's bored, lonely, or seeking validation? Has she ever acknowledged the silence or taken responsibility for the distance? Or does she just slide back into your inbox as if nothing ever happened? Patterns speak louder than apologies, louder than timing, louder than words, and your emotional bias will try to silence those patterns unless you deliberately bring them into the light. Here's the truth you don't want to admit. If the history between you two has been chaotic, inconsistent, or imbalanced, one cute message doesn't magically turn the sequel into a romance. Chaos doesn't become commitment just because she sent an emoji. Once you've checked your motives, your emotional footing, and the patterns that got you here, you're finally ready for the next stage, leading the tone of the interaction instead of letting her energy set the terms. When she reappears after a stretch of silence, the emotional frame between you isn't intact anymore. Something was interrupted. Something shifted. The old dynamic, whatever it was, faded, cracked, or collapsed during the distance. That's why the worst thing you can do is pretend nothing happened and slip right back into the same energy you had before she vanished. A lot of men do exactly that. They rush to reestablish warmth. They try to fill the gap with enthusiasm. They attempt to recreate old intimacy in the first 5 messages. All of that comes from fear. The fear that if they don't act fast enough, she'll disappear again. But leading the emotional tone means refusing to be dragged into a rhythm. It means setting the pace instead of surrendering to it. It means understanding that your response is not just a reply, it's a signal. And that signal should come from groundedness, not eagerness. Here's the simple truth. You cannot lead from panic. You cannot lead from nostalgia. You cannot lead from the need to get things back to how they were. You lead from presence. That starts with a neutral, steady energy. Not cold, not overly warm, just grounded. You're not here to chase clarity. You are clarity. You're not trying to prove you're still the same good guy she once liked. You're showing that you've grown into someone who won't abandon his standards just because someone shows up again. One of the strongest ways to hold the frame is to guide the conversation with calm curiosity. Not pressure, not interrogation, curiosity. And the simplest, cleanest question that does this is, what made you want to reach out? This question does three things immediately. It brings the silence into the room without hostility, it invites honesty without forcing it, and it reveals her emotional posture. If she deflects, jokes, or avoids answering, you've learned something. If she becomes sincere or vulnerable or accountable, you've learned something else entirely. Her reaction tells you more than her message ever could. Remember, frame isn't about control, it's about direction. You set the tone she steps into, not with pressure, but with presence, not with tactics, but with centeredness. And the fastest way to lose that frame, dumping your emotions all over her the moment she opens the door. Which brings us to what you must avoid next. Nothing collapses your strength faster than unloading everything you've been holding the moment she reaches out. It's tempting. You've had time to stew in unanswered questions, lingering hurt, pent-up frustration, or unresolved longing, and when she finally sends that message, it feels like an opening to pour it all out. But emotional dumping is not vulnerability, it's not courage, it's loss of containment. Emotional spillage looks like this. Long paragraphs explaining how much her silence affected you, rapid-fire messages trying to clarify everything at once, confessions laced with fear, hope, pain, and pressure, a desperate need to be understood, validated, or reassured. You think you're being honest. You think you're finally expressing what you've been bottling up. But if your emotions aren't grounded, if you haven't processed them first, what you're doing isn't sharing, it's leaking. And leakage never reads as strength, it reads as instability. The impact on her is immediate. She'll feel the weight of your emotions hitting her all at once, and instead of drawing her closer, it pushes her into the role of emotional regulator, something she never agreed to be. It signals that her return has the power to destabilize you, that she's the center of your emotional universe, and that you haven't grown through the silence at all. Now, avoiding spillage doesn't mean suppressing everything. Pretending to be unbothered is just repression, and repression always cracks later. Containment is something entirely different. Containment means you feel fully, but you don't make her responsible for those feelings. You process them yourself through journaling, reflection, conversations with trusted friends, or simply giving yourself time so that when you show up clean. Here's a practical rule. If you have more than 2 sentences worth of emotional content to deliver, write it out somewhere else first. See what part of it is clarity and what part is just emotional overflow. Most of what you want to say in the heat of reconnection is temporary impulse, not truth. When the relationship genuinely rebuilds, if it ever does, there will be space for deeper emotional conversations. But that space must be earned, not forced, and the man who can lead with calm presence instead of emotional urgency is the man who communicates strength without saying a word. The silence you endured wasn't just an empty space. It wasn't a punishment or a void you had to survive. It was a reset, a forced pause that gave you room to breathe, recalibrate, and remember who you are when you're not wrapped up in someone else's emotional orbit. That space may have felt painful, confusing, or even humiliating at first, but it also offered you something priceless: clarity. Maybe you started sleeping better. Maybe you rediscovered routines that make you feel grounded. Maybe you finally had time to focus on your work, your fitness, your goals. Maybe you simply noticed how much mental noise disappears when you're not waiting for her messages. That is peace. Not the absence of feelings, but the presence of stability. Peace looks like checking your phone less, thinking more clearly, breathing more easily, reconnecting with your own pace instead of chasing someone else's. So when she reappears, the question is no longer, how do I get her back? It becomes, does letting her back in protect or disturb the peace I fought to rebuild? A lot of men welcome chaos just to avoid loneliness. They confuse emotional turbulence with emotional connection. They mistake intensity for intimacy. They convince themselves that the return of someone familiar will solve the emptiness inside, but chaos disguised as connection will keep you in a loop, an exhausting cycle that steals your focus, drains your self-respect, and disrupts your growth. Before you reply, look at the energy she brings back with her. Is she taking responsibility? Is she clear, direct, honest, or is she vague, casual, and testing to see if you're still available whenever she needs a hit of attention? Her message is not an invitation into your life. It's information. You decide what to do with it. This is where your power shifts. You're not standing at the door hoping she chooses you. You're standing inside the world you've rebuilt, evaluating whether she deserves a place in it. That mindset alone transforms how you respond, how you show up, and how you lead. Because at the core of masculine strength is peace. If someone disrupts it, drains it, or plays loosely with it, they don't get easy access. They earn it or they lose it. And now that you understand what your silence has given you, you're ready for the final step. Responding as the man you've become, not the man you used to be. By the time she reaches out, the real question isn't what she said, why she said it, or what she wants. The real question is, who are you now? There's the version of you she walked away from. The one who reacted fast, overgave, overexplained, and hoped his effort would close the emotional gap. And then there's the version that emerged during the silence, the man who learned restraint, clarity, and self-respect. Your evolved self doesn't fear outcomes. He's not auditioning. He's not hoping to be chosen. He's grounded enough to know that connection only works when both people show up fully, not when one is chasing scraps of certainty. He doesn't need her to validate his growth. He embodies it through how he speaks, how he slows down, and how he sets boundaries without hostility. This final step is about aligning your response with the man you've become, and depending on her intent and your truth, there are 3 clean, grounded paths forward. Option 1, acknowledge, then maintain distance. If her energy is vague, inconsistent, or evasive, you keep the interaction polite but minimal, not cold, not petty, just clear. You're not investing where clarity and consistency are absent. Your tone communicates respect without offering renewed access. Option 2, open the door, but slowly. If she shows accountability, vulnerability, and genuine intent, you can allow the connection to reopen, but on a measured pace. Consistency over excitement, actions over words. You're not rebuilding what was, you're evaluating what could be, and you're doing it from a place of strength rather than longing. Option 3, do not continue. If her return threatens your peace, repeats old patterns, or feels like another loop of the same emotional cycle, you have every right to step back entirely. Sometimes the strongest response is the one that protects your future, even if your feelings tug you toward the past. This can be silence or a firm, respectful closure. Either way, it's a choice rooted in self-respect. The point isn't which option you take. The point is that you choose, not your fear, not your impulse, not the old version of you that chased certainty at the expense of self-worth. This moment is your mirror. It reveals whether you've simply survived the silence or evolved through it. How you respond isn't a test she gives you, it's a test you give yourself. When a woman comes back after silence, most men treat it like a lifeline. But if you followed this journey, you already know the truth. Her message is not the main event. Your response is, because the moment that notification shows up, it doesn't just poke your feelings. It exposes your relationship with yourself. It touches the parts of you that crave reassurance, that hate uncertainty, that want things to finally make sense. But now you see the bigger picture. You pause, you check your motives, you read intent instead of fantasies. You lead the emotional tone instead of rushing to fill the void. You don't pour out raw emotion, hoping she'll cradle it. You protect the peace you built in her absence, and you respond not as the man she left, but as the man you've grown into. Whether she stays in your life or not, this entire process is about reclaiming your center. She can return with clarity or with confusion. She can come back sincerely or casually. But the one thing that must remain constant is you, your standards, your grounded presence, your evolution. In the end, it isn't about getting her back, it's about not losing yourself the moment she returns. So here's your final reflection. Will I answer this message as the man I used to be or the man I became through the silence? Answer that honestly, and everything else becomes clear. If this hits somewhere you usually try to avoid, drop a comment below. Tell me whether you're at option 1, 2, or 3. Hit like if you recognize moments where you acted from fear, and subscribe if you're ready to become the kind of man who doesn't get pulled by any message, any silence, or any return because he leads from inner strength, not emotional dependence.